So next we'll look at how to use the finally statement. So put this finally demo.py, and let's say that we have something like this, x equals none. So we're going to initialize a variable x. We're going to assign it to none so it doesn't have a value to begin with. And then we're going to put a try block together and say x is equal to 1 divided by 0. That's going to drive a exception. Now, instead of an except block, we're going to put a finally block, and we're going to print we're just going to print cleaning up, and we'll say x is equal delete x. And what this will do is when you delete a variable, it actually takes it out of memory and frees up the memory. So in this case, let's say that what we want to do is if we have a problem, with something, we just want to clean up all of our variables, and often you use a finally block for things like closing any files that might be open, which we'll experiment with later, closing database connections, anything that we don't want to have remaining behind after our program exits. So this finally block will always execute no matter what. Let's see what happens when we run this. So I'm going to run it using Control F5. Let me delete these so that they're not in the way. And let's see what happens. So when we ran this, we can see it just went straight to cleaning up. And then it displayed our error. Because we didn't have an except, the exception still gets thrown. And we get to see it as an unhandled exception message when we run it. But notice that cleaning up executed nonetheless. So really the finally block is something that always executes. Let's take this program. I'm going to copy it and put it into my finally demo. And so we had this one. And when we ran it, if we put 5 and a 0, it gave us an exception and caught it, made a nice message. Put FIVE, it caught it. If we put something that was actually usable, it did the math. And so it worked fine. Let's add a finally in here. And I'm just going to say always executes, just to demonstrate how finally works. So here I'll put in a 5 and a 0. And we can see that this finally, even though it went and did this branch here of the except, the finally still executed. Do you want to do another? Yes. And then we'll put in, say, FIVE. Always executes, yes. And then if I put 5 and 3, every time it always executes. This is different than the else, which we saw last time. So the else only executes if there's no exception. So again, I'll run this. And let's see what we get. Notice that the always executes executed, but the else did not execute. And then if I put 5 and 3, always executes still executed. The finally always executed. The else, though, executed because there was no exceptions. So that's kind of the difference between the else and the finally. Finally will always do this step. It will only do the else if there are no exceptions. So those are the differences between these two clauses. So now you know how to use a try, multiple except blocks. You know how to roll up all the exceptions under the final exception. bring it in as an object here, E, that we can get the message out of, and then how to use an else and a finally. And we don't use this else very often. Mostly we will use the finally block when we're dealing with files and databases. And then most of the time when we're doing try excepts, we're using except blocks. Thank you very much.